Good morning, children. Today I am going to start a new chapter, Chapter 9, Reproduction in Plants. So, you know that all living organisms have a lifespan after which they die. No organism lives forever. However, all living organisms are able to reproduce more of their own kind before they die. This ability to reproduce is a common characteristic of all living organisms. The process by which living organisms can reproduce more of their own kind is known as reproduction. The detailed mechanism of reproduction is, however, different for different types of living organisms. Let us first try to familiarize ourselves with the details of this process for plants. How do plants reproduce? Before we study this, let us find out more about the parts of a flowering plant. Just roots, stem, and leaves are known as the vegetative parts of a plant. It is the flowers that are the reproductive parts of a plant. Flowers change into fruits which contain seeds. And when seeds germinate, they form new plants. Next, types of reproduction in plants. The methods of reproduction in plants are generally grouped into two main types, asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. First, asexual reproduction. In asexual reproduction, an individual can reproduce on its own without the involvement of another individual of the same species. The division of a bacterial cell into two daughter cells is an example of asexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction is not, however, limited to single-celled organisms. Most plants have the ability to reproduce asexually. So, how does asexual reproduction takes place in different organisms? Let us find out. First process is budding. Some organisms like yeast reproduce asexually through budding. You know that yeast is a unicellular organism. To reproduce asexually, it produces an outgrowth called a bud. The nucleus in the yeast cell also divides into two daughter nuclei. Out of these, one nucleus remains in the parent cell while the other moves to the bud. The bud may grow and get detached from the parent cell. Sometimes another bud arises from the first bud and soon a chain of buds gets formed. This process results in reproduction of a number of yeast cells in a short period of time. You can see in this figure, just parent cell is shown. Next step, formation of bud. Next, division of nucleus. And finally, daughter cell is formed. Do you know probiotics are dietary supplements containing potentially beneficial bacteria or yeast? Some probiotic supplements use the yeast Saccharomyces boulardii to maintain and restore the natural flora in the human intestine. Next, activity 1. To grow yeast in a beaker. Take about 100 ml of lukewarm water in a beaker and dissolve 1 teaspoon of cane sugar in it. Add a few grains of dry yeast, just available at the bakery shop or a chemist. Yeast cakes available at some bakery shops can also be used. Mix well and cover the mouth of the beaker with a lid of aluminum foil. Leave it undisturbed for about 24 hours. You will observe bubbles rising in the solution and froth forming at its surface. Take a drop of this solution on a clean glass slide. You may use methylene blue to stain the yeast cells. Cover it with a glass cover slip. Observe the yeast cells on the glass slide under the microscope to see the different stages of budding. Next, fragmentation. You may have observed slimy green patches on the ground near ponds and other water bodies having a stagnant water. If you try to lift them with a stick, you will see long fine green thread like structures. These are called algae. One such alga is Spirogyra. It reproduces asexually by fragmentation. A Spirogyra filament breaks up into two or more fragments. These fragments grow and develop into new individuals. As this process continues, the whole pond may get covered by a green scum. Next, spore formation. You may have observed a cottony growth on stale bread or some spoiled foodstuffs. It does not take long for this cottony growth to turn into minute pinhead-like structures of bread mold. These are called sporangia, singular sporangium, as they have spores in them. The spores are thick-walled, microscopic, asexually reproducing bodies. They are carried by wind and keep floating in air. They germinate when they find a suitable medium to grow. Mosses and ferns also reproduce through reproduction of spores. These are examples of non-flowering plants that do not produce seeds. In next class, I will discuss about some other methods of asexual reproduction in plants, just known as vegetative propagation. Thank you.